different things through Culture Club, and it's 10 years of Culture Club this July. And we're going to have a series of events over the summer. With Eamon Carr from Horselips is coming in July. We have a fest, yes, the legendary drummer. We have a mini festival to Conway Savage, the late Conway Savage, who played with Nick Cave in the Bad and some of his old friends and bandmates are coming, so we've that in September. So follow Culture Club on Instagram and We Are the Waves 2025 for the festival. Thanks to Tom, as always. It's great to be in Roe River Books, the independent bookshop par excellence, without equal. The biggest welcome that you can muster for Ian Svenonius.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark Corcoran. Mark Corcoran, Culture Club. Thanks for bringing Ian Svenonius to Roe River Books, and thanks to Roe River Books and Tom and the whole staff here, and the people of Dundalk, who have given escapism an incomparable welcome. Flat whites, scones. We say scone where I'm from. We say scone. You say scone, I say scone.
It's our pleasure. I'm so glad you're here. Also, we hoped to have the books, but because of
supply chain issues, it's COVID.
COVID,
the long tentacle of COVID and the tariffs.
Very unreasonable and wouldn't deliver them, even though they're in the country. So the books will be here tomorrow, probably. So there's some here, but if you wish to pre-buy,
you should buy them from Roe River Books.
Buy them from Roe River Books.
We've got these. These are just tantalizing. These are sort of like the food in the, in the window at a Chinese restaurant. They're just to tantalize you, and you can sign up and get your own copy, which will be fresher unless it won't have been, these have been, these have been in our suitcases. Yeah, exactly.
You're slightly jet lagged.
I didn't want to say underpants. Anyway, but there's 4 titles.
Yeah.
These are all books that I've written. This one is called The Psychic Soviet. This is the first book. This is a small manual of aphorisms and inspirational bromides and revolutionary poetry with illustrations. And then, it's essays. Then this is the second book. It's called Supernatural Strategies for Making a Rock and Roll Book. And it's a how-to manual on making your own rock and roll group. In the age of the rock school, this might seem redundant, but this has all the information that's left out by those cynical institutions, which reduce rock and roll to some kind of technical
term,
razzle dazzle. This is about
format.
Yeah, this is about what rock and roll is really about: incompetence. All right, then the third one, censorship. Now it's about a people's censorship, censoring not what you think, but censoring the media, the armed forces, and the political class. That's right. It's actually many different essays about different subjects, and every one of them is scintillating and extraordinary.
Yeah.
But it's just named after the most kind of, just the most controversial of the essays. Then the fourth book is called Against the Written Word. This is the latest, and it's probably maybe the most relevant to our times. It's actually represents a new movement of analphabeticism. That's a fancy word for illiteracy. But a willful illiteracy, a de-education. And we're going to talk about that after our Q&A.
Yes. Or even in between, because we're making this up as we go along. Even though this seems really professional and slick, I know you're impressed already, but we're improvising.
It's like a wedding. We did a run through about a week ago.
I actually would like to ask you where you're from and the music you grew up in, and what was the early music that meant something to you?
Well, I'm from Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is considered the mid-Atlantic region of the United States of America. Welcome, come on in. Don't worry about making noise, we've got microphones. We'll drown you out. Okay, but it's really the South. It's really the American South. It's below the Mason-Dixon line, what we call Dixie, and it's Washington, D.C. You know, it's sort of was created out of 64 square miles of Maryland and 36 square miles of Virginia. It was the shape of a diamond. It was supposed to resemble a pyramid and Washington, the capital of the District of Columbia, the federal city, was supposed to be the capstone of the pyramid. So that betrays the Masonic nature of Washington, D.C. The Masonic design was designed by a Frenchman and a black city planner named Benjamin. Wait, I forget the French guy's name too. Anyway, I haven't lived there for a while. The point is, it's a mystical center of power, and it's an interesting place.
John Fahey is from...
John Fahey went to my high school. Yes, and so did Jim Henson. Yeah.
So what was the music?
So music had quite an important role in culture, which maybe it still does in some places, but I think it had more of a central role to people's identity construction. So, it was just classic rock radio and the Beatles. So we were just really into the Beatles, and we were just indoctrinated with a rock and roll myth. And at the time there was a lot of cartoons on the television of kind of cartoon bands, or these kind of it was all the reruns from the 60s generation. So it was like the Hair Bear Bunch, which was like a bunch of animals that played music. And then there was Lancelot Link, Secret Chimp. He had a band called the Evolution Revolution. And then there was the reruns of the Monkees, and then the Partridge Family, they were a band, and then the Brady Bunch formed a band, and so did Gilligan, and the people on the island, they formed a band called the Mosquitoes. So it was just bands, there's bands. That was sort of, so by being into rock and roll, it was just, that was what I was programmed to do. But, anyway.
And was there anything in particular? What was the first record you bought?
Well, at the time, all the Beatles records were being reissued for $3. So I remember we would save our money up and buy a new Beatles record all the time. And at the time, a lot of them had these kind of garish reissue things that were sort of like Happy Days style covers.
Could you tell us a little bit about then the Washington D.C. music scene, because from what we know of it, it's Discord Records, Ian Mackay, Fugazi.
Yeah.
Were you influenced by them, or were you part of that scene? I know you have a series of interviews with quite a few. So.
I've never heard of that.
Oh, okay.
No. They were
disappearing.
They were
my very eyes.
No, they were so DC music. So Washington D.C. at the time, music was very corporate in America, kind of like it is now. But there was these big stars, Bruce Springsteen or whoever, and then there was a punk scene that had been, you know, it was a hardcore scene. And then there was also a college rock scene. So there were these kind of tiers of music. And hardcore was very localized. And every city had its hardcore scene that had a kind of parochial localism and this kind of almost patriotic sensibility about, like, you know, so it was very, you know, weird to the modern sensibility because people don't really have that anymore. But it was, you know, so, you know, when I was 14 and I learned about, had learned about punk rock from listening to college radio, and then, you know, I was like, oh, there's this girl saw me, I was dressed funny, and she was like, oh, there's a show. You know, here's a flyer, and so then I was like kind of led into this underground scene that was really like very underground, and but it was, you know, really thriving, tons of bands, and yeah, the Discord Records bands that you're talking about, which were Minor Threat and all those bands, were sort of a big part of it, but there was a lot of different factions. Not factions, but, you know, different. It had a lot of diversity in styles. It was, you know, because Washington D.C. produced Fugazi and Minor Threat and all those bands, but it also produced, you know, Pussy Galore and Velvet, Monkeys, and Half Japanese, and the Bad Brains, and, you know, so there was a lot of stuff going on. So it wasn't entirely just this hardcore thing. There's a lot of stuff, and, you know, so yeah, it was groovy.
Yeah. Could you tell us then about the early bands that you started, or your forays first into music, and how that was?
Well, you know, I just, you know, we were, I just started a band with my friends, and we were totally incompetent, and we didn't know how to play music at all. But it was more based on ideas, and I've been reading a lot of modernist art manifestos, and so our first group, Nation of Ulysses, the first group I really formed, was really based on this, you know, just ideas and presentation of energy. We were really, you know, that's what turned us on, was just total energy. And yeah, and I don't think there wasn't enough self-reflection in terms of sound, because it was, you know, at the time, a group existed as a name on a flyer or a record. So before you were kind of like, before you kind of recorded, then you were just like this thing that happened, and then it was like, oh, and people would see it. It was like, oh, that thing. But there wasn't a lot of, you know, now a group is, you're recorded immediately, and there's a lot of, you know, reflection on like, oh, that sounds terrible, you know. Everybody's like, can hear how bad that sounds, you know, but at the time, there wasn't really the same thing, you know, you just did your thing, and then you were like, and then it was like, oh, that was crazy, I split my head open, it was blood everywhere. So that was kind of, you know, that was more like what was happening. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, later I read this interview with the Byrds, and they were talking about their manager would record them at every practice and play it back at them, and they were like, ugh. You know, and I was a little jealous of that. I was like, wow, that would have been great.
So ideas obviously meant a lot to you from the beginning, and I saw an interview that Matt Sweeney did with you, and he said a rock and roll singer, and he was speaking particularly about the book Psychic Soviet.
The Psychic
so it might
Soviet.
lead into that, but he said a rock and roll singer is, if he's doing his job, is absolutely attacking your reality, is destroying your myths, is exposing your magical thinking for what it is, which is another thing I think you're wonderful at, meaning you, not me. And he said Psychic Soviet goes beyond demythologizing things. So the writing and the ideas were important.
Interested in, you know, we read this this Dexy's Midnight Runner treatise, about style that was very influential for us, and just and just a band. This is the thing is the record album. I think a record album is a really interesting thing because rock and roll music as an art form, when I was growing up, art had kind of become irrelevant. Art was this rarefied world that was sort of whatever, but music was the people's art, and by art I mean like it was ideas, it was presentation, and it was sort of the idea of Wagner's idea of opera, meaning Gesamtkunstwerk, like a total artwork that brought everything in. You could make a video, you could make a movie like The Who, you could have you had the interviews, you could do writing, you could do poetry, theater, music, obviously, and then also the record cover was really important. And I think rock and roll is interesting, and the album is really interesting because everybody had the same restrictions with their presentation. Every group had a 12 by 12 record jacket with two sides, or maybe gatefold. So it's sort of like, what are you going to do with that? And that's what's interesting about it, because as opposed to like Richard Serra versus Chris Burden, or like it's like, if you look at art, it can really be anything. Like art, fine art, can really be anything. But I think it's interesting that groups really all had the same format that they had to present their thing on. So, and that's why it's so interesting. When that was taken away by the CD and then the digital format, especially, groups really, the constellation of groups really lost its kind of, everybody lost their bearings on who they were and what they were, and the context is really like ripped away, and it's resulted in a relative powerlessness for groups. At the time, the internet was just a babe relative to what it is now. So this is a book. It's actually a lot of essays about a lot of different things, but one of the essays, the first essay, is called Against the Written Word. And as I mentioned before, it's a pro-illiterate. It's talking about a new movement, moving away from the written word, because maybe it's nefarious. Anyway, I'm just going to read a passage from it. So. Literate man is, indeed, the victim of every sort of manipulation. He or she, due to their learning, is almost defenseless. Mankind, after all, is born with certain natural defenses. One of them is ignorance. When Enlightenment ideology spread the gospel of universal literacy, man, once benighted and strong, became literate and weak. Once one learns how to read and becomes a reader, one is stripped of sense, helpless to resist the whims of the wordsmiths. In fact, the more literate one is, the more susceptible to suggestion, the more malleable one's mind, while the half-literate dum-dum still possibly harbors a healthy suspicion of the ruling class's latest prestidigitation. In the arena of academia, the PhD student can be made to believe anything. The word's dominance over us, its master role in our relationship, is nothing to be surprised by. The written word seems to be truth itself, particularly if the right typeface is used and the words are arranged just so. And when one can't escape words, they jump out and inflict themselves on us, like flashers in the night, on billboards, in books, and the buzzing alerts from the telecommunication hardware that occupies each of our pockets. Even this piece of writing, the one you are presently reading, is attempting to rally you, persuade you, affect your thoughts and actions. But this piece of writing you're reading now, is different than all the rest. It constitutes the most important piece of text you will ever read. above Shakespeare, Milton, and Joyce. Indeed, you are quite fortunate to be privy to its special blend of truth and taboo, because these words aren't designed to perpetuate the reading of words, but instead to end the reading of words, to inspire the reader henceforth to never read another piece of writing again. Wait, hold on. I have one other thing. Oh, I can't find it.
No pressure.
No pressure. Okay, wait. Why did we learn to read? We had no choice. It was compulsory. Forced upon us when we were just babes. Absolutely impressionable. Without the agency, wisdom, or foresight to understand just what it would mean to be a reader. Another goon. Another dupe. Another goose-stepping soldier in the army of letters. We didn't understand that it would mean a lifetime spent in the prison of literacy, that the con men in advertising and news media now had a direct mine shaft into our previously cloistered cavern of consciousness. We were now a jukebox that would play whatever tune they wanted. People of the future may judge us, call us stupid and naive, but we didn't use rock and roll music for its intended purpose, to create illiteracy in its listeners.
I will use music for its intended purpose.
And finally, number 12, I will be there for other analphabetics who are attempting to quit. I will be there for other analphabetics who are attempting to quit.
That's it?
One day at a time. All right. What's your name?
Steve.
Let's have a round of applause for Steve. Steve is going to recount his own experiences as a new analphabetic, as somebody who's recovering from literacy, all right? And we're going to give him a little. Okay.
1 second. John, you have to get... Hello, my name is Steve, and I'm a reader. I haven't read anything for 18 months now. I stopped reading as a protest against the reduction of our world into words by the digital overlords. The word weapons that they have transformed our world into have replaced experience, sensual touch, taste, smell, and the space. Legalized jargon, linguistic engineering, and they have created a world of fear and terror which we inhabit like a penal colony. And the bourgeoisies, in the highest expression of their class, the Silicon Valley overlords, use words as a way to keep us from our lives and from one another. They use the words to involve us as participants and collaborators in our own oppression. We refuse to read their filth any longer. In doing so, we will be free. And they've transformed each other, each of us, into a barrister who parses the verbiage of our competitors in a hope of unhorsing them. This is not a world we can inhabit anymore, and it's easy to leave. Just throw away your reading glasses and refuse to squint. I threw away your reading glasses.
Thank you for sharing your experiences. Thank you very much. That was very brave. Who would like to tell their testimonial? Thank you. What's your name?
Jeff.
Jeff. Let's have a round of applause for Jeff.
Hello, my name is Jeff. I'm a reader. I began reading at a young age. My first exposure to reading was at a school where we were told it was a requirement. Reading was mostly pushed by teachers, but also encouraged and taught by parents, church, and civic leaders, and other representatives of the ruling class authority. It began innocently enough. First I was taught letters. They called them my ABCs. I suppose the possessive my was used so that I would feel a personal stake in the alphabet's success. The ABCs served as a gateway. Once I knew the letters, words soon followed, then sentences, and soon whole paragraphs. I started keeping a journal. Though I thought this was highly personal, it merely reflected the conceits of the ruling class and mirrored ruling class ideology. After all, I was working with their alphabet, their grammar, their turns of phrase, their sentence structure, using their tools. I dreamed of being a journalist. I wanted to scribble trite regurgitations of ruling class ideology for others to be force-fed, for my personal glory. The readers were always considered marks, dupes, suckers, brains to wash. We were raised on the heroic myths of Woodward and Bernstein? Is there a second? And Bernstein. Another lie. Now everyone knows Watergate was a palace coup and the Post were just CIA associates.
Thank you, Jeff, for sharing your experiences. Thank you. That was beautiful. Does anybody else have an experience they'd like to share? Don't be shy. Hello. What's your name? Sophie. Sophie? Yeah. Let's welcome Sophie.
Yeah, my name is Sophie. I'm a reader. I stopped reading almost 11 months ago. I wanted to protest the memoirs I was being forced to read. History is the tale told by the oppressors. Memory is bourgeois. Memoirs are bourgeois. The ruling class is in charge of the memory of the culture, and they tailor it to their will with their incessant historical revisionism. The memoir is a part of this disgusting charade. Memory is bourgeois, memoirs are bourgeois. They are a weapon used against the people. Down with reading, down with the written word.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you. Thank you. That was very inspiring. Would anybody else like to share their experiences? Hello. What's your name? Anya. Let's welcome Anya.
Hello, my name is Anya. I'm a reader. I stopped reading 10 months ago. In that time, I haven't read a single book, sentence, or word, not even an abbreviation. If one of these things comes into my field of vision, I avert my eyes before I can comprehend its meaning. I no longer wear my glasses, as this makes incomprehension easier. I'm not saying it's been easy. I'm tempted all the time. But I find the further away from reading I get, the more grounded I feel. I'm less angry at people I've never met and situations I have no control over. Now that reading isn't part of my life, I am no longer commanded to do this or that, to be angry, to be delighted, to be sad. Once I left reading, I was free for the first time since my formative years, free from the omniscient moral authority which held forth in every subject, product, event, with a partisan voice of chiding piety. By not reading, I defeated God and authority. I invoked anarchy and peace. I want to tell all my brothers and sisters not to read. I want them all to be free, like me.
Thank you, Anya. That was beautiful. What's your name? Laura. Laura. Let's welcome Laura.
Hello, my name is Laura. I'm a reader. I have abstained from reading now for almost 6 months. I'm no longer hypnotised by celebrity gossip and moralistic nonsense. I'm free from propaganda and warmongering. I'm free from advertisements that cajole, jeer, seduce and manipulate. I'm free from the propagandistic filth at the bookstore that corrals us into the ruling class latest mode, their latest psychic prison cell. Now that I'm free of reading, the wellness industry no longer makes me neurotic that eating some particular type of food will lead to my imminent death, or that picking my nose will destroy me. I no longer am trying to conform to some unreal daily ritual to extend my life a few days. Now, instead of reading, I am living.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I think we have time for just one more testimonial. Tom. Even Tom. Tom, welcome to our...
This is not easy. I'd like to thank Mark and Ian and Sandy. I thought this was an event. I didn't realize it was an intervention. Thank you all so much. My name is Tom. I'm a reader. I used to read everything. Magazines, newspapers, bestsellers, cookbooks, self-help, detective novels, and even text messages. You name it, if I saw it, I would scan it with my eyes. I was a speed reader. I was completely out of control. I would even read aloud to my lover in bed from whatever book I was into at the time. I was actively pushing it on others. I feel ashamed sometimes. But I had no choice. I was made to read as a child by the power structure my classmates were coerced similarly. We were taught that reading was a noble act and that it was comprised a higher tier of moral achievement. They told us it made us good. They said it made us better than other people. I was so proud to read. I once started reading, I couldn't stop. Reading became a compulsion. If letters or words were put in front of me, I consumed them through the pretension that I would be reading literature and poetry. In reality, my days were spent in a wretched penitentiary of ad copy, billboards and fearful news propaganda. When we began to read, we all had dreams as to what it was, what it would look like. We imagined ourselves curled up on a riverbank or beach blanket, thumbing through a French novel or a philosopher's tract, but instead we were reading the oligarch's propaganda feed, reciting it to others and inciting the violence it encouraged. The romance of reading was far different from the reality. Now I realize that literacy was pushed by the ruling classes to enslave us, to brainwash us, to make us captive subjects, dupes, and the heralds of their interminable propaganda.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you for spreading the good word, the good news. We're a protest group. We're a folk group. We rely on a sing-along. That's right. We're going to impress you into service. Everyone here has a responsibility for the experience to be complete. Let me hear you say yeah. Can we turn down the lights a little bit? We've got these beautiful lights, these incandescent lights. Oh, that's nice. All right, that's perfect. Oh, wait. Yeah, look at that. Yeah. All right, come on. If I had a hammer, well, all right. If I had a hammer, well, all right. If I had a hammer, baby, all right. You know that we'd hammer all night. If I had a hammer,
Well, alright. Alright. If I had a hammer, well, okay.
Okay.
If I had a hammer, well, okay. Okay. If I had a hammer, baby, okay. You know that we'd hammer till the break of day. If I had a hammer, well, okay. Okay. If I had a hammer, I'd get my revenge. I'd use that hammer, baby, on all of them. I would use that hammer, to get what is mine. If I had a hammer, I'd smash it up. Yeah, I would wave that hammer, baby, all around. I would use that hammer, all the time. But you know what? I ain't got no hammer. I ain't got no hammer. I ain't got no hammer. I ain't got no bell. I ain't got no bell. I ain't got no bell. I ain't got and I wanna raise hell. I've got no hammer. I've got no hammer to my name. Baby, I've got no hammer. I've got no hammer, and it's a shame. Yeah, it's a goddamn shame. I want a hammer. Give me a hammer. I need a hammer. Who's got? I want a hammer. I need a hammer. I want a hammer. I want a